a quiet little town where everyone knew each other by name, Sarah Miller lived an ordinary life. She wasn't famous or rich, but she was well liked in her community because of the job she did every day, delivering mail. For years, Sarah had walked up and down streets lined with colorful houses, carrying envelopes, magazines, and packages to people who relied on her to stay connected to the world outside their cozy suburb. It wasn't always easy work. Sometimes the weather was bad or dogs barked loudly as she approached, but Sarah loved what she did. To her, being a postal carrier meant more than just dropping off letters. It meant bringing smiles to people's faces when they received something special. One sunny afternoon, everything changed for Sarah. The post office was bustling as usual, with workers sorting through piles of mail and loading trucks for delivery routes. Sarah was busy organizing her stack of packages when the door burst open. In walked Karen Wilson, a woman whose reputation preceded her. Everyone in the neighborhood referred to her as HOA Karen, not because she officially worked for the Homeowners Association, but because she acted like its self-appointed enforcer. Karen was known for micromanaging even the smallest details of the neighborhood, from making sure no one painted their front door an unapproved shade of blue to complaining about lawn decorations during holidays. Karen marched straight up to the counter, her face red with anger. "I need to speak to whoever delivered my package," she snapped, slamming a tracking slip onto the desk. Her voice echoed through the room, drawing stares from both customers and employees. Behind the counter, a nervous clerk hesitated before pointing toward Sarah. "That's her over there," he said quietly. Sarah looked up from her work, sensing trouble brewing. When Karen locked eyes with her, the tension in the air became palpable. Without wasting a second, Karen stormed over, towering above Sarah despite wearing heels that clicked sharply against the tiled floor. "You!" Karen exclaimed, jabbing a finger at Sarah. "Where is my package? I know you have it." Taken aback, Sarah blinked in confusion. "Ma'am, can you please tell me which package you're referring to?" she asked politely, trying to keep her tone calm. "It's the one addressed to me. The important one," Karen shouted, waving the tracking slip like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom drama. "It says here it was supposed to arrive 3 days ago, but guess what? It never showed up. And now I'm hearing rumors that you might be responsible." Sarah felt her cheeks flush, partly out of embarrassment and partly out of frustration. She pulled out her clipboard and scanned the records for Karen's address. Sure enough, the system confirmed the package had been marked as delivered on time. "According to our records, ma'am, your package was delivered exactly when it was scheduled," Sarah explained patiently. "If you'd like, I can check again tomorrow, but right now, everything indicates it arrived safely." But Karen wasn't satisfied, not even close. Her lips pressed into a thin line and she crossed her arms tightly across her chest. "Don't give me that nonsense," she spat. "I want proof. Show me the surveillance footage of my front porch. Someone must have caught whoever took it." At this point, Sarah exchanged a glance with the clerk behind the counter, who shrugged helplessly. Unfortunately, most residential areas didn't have cameras installed near mailboxes, let alone ones monitored by the Postal Service. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Sarah said gently, "but we don't have any footage available. Maybe you could check with your neighbors to see if anyone saw anything unusual." Karen scoffed loudly, clearly unconvinced. "Oh, sure, blame the neighbors next. Typical excuse." She leaned closer, lowering her voice but somehow managing to make it sound even more menacing. "Listen carefully, young lady. If that package doesn't turn up soon, I'll find a way to prove you're lying. Mark my words." With that ominous warning hanging in the air, Karen spun around dramatically and stormed out of the post office, leaving behind a trail of whispers among the staff and patrons. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, clutching her clipboard tightly as she replayed the encounter in her mind. Something about Karen's demeanor unsettled her, not just because of the accusation itself, but because of the intensity behind it. This wasn't just someone upset about a lost item. This was personal. Over the next couple of hours, Sarah tried to focus on her tasks, pushing thoughts of Karen aside. Still, the memory of those piercing eyes lingered. As she loaded her truck with parcels for the afternoon route, she couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's visit wasn't the end of the story. Little did Sarah know, her instincts were spot on. What started as a simple misunderstanding was about to spiral into something far more complicated and far more dangerous. When Sarah finally set off on her route later that day, she noticed something peculiar almost immediately. Normally, delivering mail was a peaceful process, broken only by friendly waves from residents or the occasional bark of a dog tied to a fence. But today, as she drove past Karen's house, she spotted the woman standing outside, hands on her hips, glaring directly at her. It was subtle but unmistakable. Karen was watching her. Though she tried to brush it off, Sarah couldn't ignore the nagging sensation that she was being followed. Over the next few days, strange coincidences began piling up. Whenever Sarah made her rounds, Karen seemed to magically appear nearby, watering plants, chatting with neighbors, or taking leisurely strolls that conveniently aligned with Sarah's schedule. At first, Sarah convinced herself it was all in her head. After all, Karen lived in the same neighborhood. It wasn't unreasonable for their paths to cross occasionally. But then came the moments that couldn't be dismissed as mere coincidence. One morning, as Sarah bent down to slide a letter into a mailbox, she glanced up and saw Karen parked across the street, binoculars in hand. Another time, while sorting mail at a cluster of rural boxes, Sarah heard the faint hum of an engine, idling nearby. Turning around, she spotted Karen's car tucked behind some bushes, its windows rolled down just enough for her to peer out. Each sighting left Sarah increasingly uneasy. Was Karen really stalking her? And if so, why? The missing package incident suddenly felt less like a harmless mix-up and more like the opening move in a much larger game. Try as she might, Sarah couldn't figure out what Karen hoped to achieve by shadowing her every step. Did she think Sarah would crack under pressure and confess to stealing the package? Or was there something else driving this bizarre behavior? Despite the growing unease, Sarah refused to let fear take over. She reminded herself that she hadn't done anything wrong and resolved to handle the situation professionally. Yet deep down, she couldn't deny the creeping suspicion that Karen's obsession with finding her lost package was far from over. Whatever was coming next, Sarah knew wouldn't be pleasant. The next few days turned into a strange and unsettling routine for Sarah. Every morning as she prepared her truck for the day's deliveries, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. At first it was small things. Karen, standing on her porch with a cup of coffee in hand, pretending to read the newspaper while glancing up just as Sarah drove by. Then there were the moments when Karen would coincidentally step outside to water her plants or chat with a neighbor whenever Sarah approached her street. It was subtle, but the pattern was undeniable. Sarah tried not to let it bother her. After all, Karen lived in the neighborhood. It wasn't unusual for their paths to cross occasionally. But as the days went on, the coincidences became harder to ignore. One afternoon, while delivering mail to a cluster of houses near Karen's, Sarah noticed a car parked at the end of the cul-de-sac. Its engine was running and the driver's seat was empty. As she walked back to her truck, she spotted Karen leaning casually against the vehicle, scrolling through her phone. When Sarah made eye contact, Karen smiled sweetly and waved, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. It was maddening. Sarah knew Karen was trying to intimidate her, but she didn't understand why. The missing package had been marked as delivered weeks ago, and there was no evidence to suggest Sarah had done anything wrong. Still, Karen seemed determined to make her life miserable. The constant surveillance weighed heavily on Sarah, making her feel like she was walking on eggshells every time she stepped out of her truck. Then came the day when Karen decided to escalate things. Sarah had just pulled up to a quiet stretch of mailboxes along a country road, a part of her route far from Karen's usual stomping grounds. She grabbed a stack of letters and began sorting them into the boxes, humming softly to herself as she worked. The peacefulness of the moment was shattered when she heard the unmistakable sound of tires crunching on gravel behind her. Turning around, she saw Karen's car pulling up directly behind hers, blocking her exit. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. What was Karen doing here? This wasn't even close to her neighborhood. Before she could process what was happening, Karen stepped out of her car, slamming the door shut with unnecessary force. She strode toward Sarah with purpose, her heels clicking sharply against the ground. Her expression was a mix of anger and triumph, as if she'd finally cornered her prey. "All right, Sarah," Karen said, stopping just a few feet away. Her voice was calm but laced with venom. "We need to talk about this package situation once and for all." Sarah took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. "Karen, I've already explained this to you," she replied evenly. "Your package was delivered according to our records. If you're still having trouble finding it, maybe you should check with your neighbors or look around your property." Again. Karen scoffed loudly, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Oh, spare me the excuses," she snapped. "I know you're hiding something. You think I don't see how you avoid my house now? How you try to sneak past without looking me in? The eye? Well, guess what? I'm on to you." Sarah felt a surge of frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm not avoiding your house, Karen," she said firmly. "I deliver mail to everyone on my route the same way. I don't have time for these accusations, especially when they're baseless." But Karen wasn't listening. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, holding it up triumphantly. "You want proof? Fine, I'll give you proof." She tapped the screen a few times before shoving it in Sarah's face. On the display was a grainy photo of Sarah's truck parked in front of Karen's house. "See this?" Karen demanded. "This is you, slinking around my mailbox like you're up to no good. Don't deny it, you were tampering with my mail." Sarah blinked in disbelief. "That's ridiculous," she said, shaking her head. "That's just me doing my job. I stop at your mailbox because that's where your mail goes. Are you seriously accusing me of stealing a package based on a picture of me? Delivering mail?" Karen's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Don't play innocent with me," she shouted, pointing a finger inches from Sarah's nose. "I know you took it, and if you don't admit it right now, I'll make sure. Everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've done." By now, the confrontation had drawn attention. A couple of nearby residents had wandered outside, curious about the raised voices. Some stood awkwardly on their porches, while others lingered closer, trying to get a better view of the drama unfolding. Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She hated being the center of attention, especially under circumstances like these. "Karen, please," Sarah pleaded, lowering her voice in an attempt to de-escalate the situation. "If you have concerns, take them up with the post office or file a formal complaint. But following me around and yelling at me isn't going to solve anything." For a brief moment, Karen hesitated. Her lips parted as if she might say something, but then her expression hardened again. "Fine," she spat. "Have it your way. But don't think this is over. Not by a long shot." With that, Karen spun on her heel and marched back to her car, slamming the door shut behind her. She revved the engine loudly before speeding off, leaving Sarah standing alone in the middle of the road. The other residents slowly dispersed, some offering sympathetic smiles or shrugs of confusion. Sarah exhaled deeply, realizing her hands were trembling. She hadn't realized how tense she'd been until the adrenaline began to fade. As she climbed back into her truck, Sarah couldn't help but wonder how much longer this would go on. Karen's behavior was becoming increasingly irrational, and Sarah worried about what she might do next. Would she continue to follow her? Confront her again? Or worse, spread rumors throughout the neighborhood? The thought sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Despite her growing unease, Sarah reminded herself that she hadn't done anything wrong. She had followed protocol, delivered the package as instructed, and maintained her professionalism despite Karen's relentless accusations. Still, the encounter left her shaken. Delivering mail had always been a straightforward, predictable part of her life. Now, thanks to Karen, it felt like navigating a minefield. Over the next few days, Sarah did her best to focus on her work, pushing thoughts of Karen to the back of her mind. But the memory of that confrontation lingered, gnawing at her confidence. She found herself constantly checking her rearview mirror, half expecting to see Karen's car trailing behind her. Even in quieter moments when she thought she was safe, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was lurking somewhere, waiting for her next opportunity to strike. What Sarah didn't realize yet was that Karen's obsession was far from satisfied. In fact, the worst was still to come. Karen's obsession with Sarah didn't stop after their explosive confrontation on the country road. If anything, it intensified. What had started as a simple accusation about a missing package had morphed into something far darker, a relentless campaign to ruin Sarah's reputation and prove her guilt, no matter how baseless the claims might be. Karen wasn't just angry anymore. She was consumed by a singular mission, one that seemed to take over every aspect of her life. Every morning, Karen would sit at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a notebook, meticulously documenting Sarah's movements. She'd jot down times, locations, and any details she deemed suspicious, like which houses Sarah visited first or how long she lingered at certain mailboxes. Armed with binoculars and a camera, Karen began stalking Sarah's route, snapping photos from afar. Some pictures showed Sarah sorting mail in her truck, while others captured her chatting briefly with residents. To Karen, these mundane moments were evidence of wrongdoing, even though they proved nothing more than Sarah doing her job. But Karen didn't stop there. She started filing complaints, not just with the Postal Service but also with local law enforcement. Each report was filled with dramatic language, accusing Sarah of theft, harassment, and tampering with private property. Officers who received the complaints quickly realized there was no substance to them. When questioned, Karen struggled to provide concrete proof beyond vague accusations and blurry photographs. Still, she refused to back down, insisting that Sarah was guilty until proven otherwise. For Sarah, the constant scrutiny became unbearable. At first, she tried to ignore it, focusing on her deliveries and reminding herself that she hadn't done anything wrong. But the weight of Karen's actions soon began to wear her down. Every time she stepped out of her truck, she felt eyes watching her, from behind curtains, parked cars, or even bushes. The once familiar streets where she'd spent years delivering mail now felt like hostile territory. Things escalated further when Karen decided to involve the rest of the neighborhood. She printed flyers titled, "Is Your Mail Safe?" and distributed them to nearby homes. The flyers featured grainy photos of Sarah's truck and ominous warnings about potential mail theft. While Karen never explicitly named Sarah, the implication was clear. Neighbors who had always greeted Sarah warmly now looked at her with suspicion, some even avoiding eye contact altogether. Sarah noticed the change immediately. One day, while handing a package to an elderly woman named Mrs. Peterson, she saw hesitation flicker across the woman's face. "Everything okay, Mrs. Peterson?" Sarah asked gently, sensing something was off. Mrs. Peterson hesitated before responding. "Oh, yes, dear. It's just, well, I've been hearing some things lately about packages going missing." Her voice trailed off, and she glanced nervously toward Karen's house. Sarah sighed inwardly but forced a smile. "I understand your concerns, ma'am, but I assure you, I follow all procedures to ensure everything is delivered safely. If you ever have questions, feel free to reach out." Mrs. Peterson nodded politely, but Sarah could tell the seed of doubt had already been planted. Over the next few days, similar interactions happened with other residents. Some were polite but distant, while others outright avoided speaking to her. The trust she'd built over years of dedicated service was crumbling under the weight of Karen's lies. The breaking point came late one evening after Sarah finished her shift. Exhausted and eager to unwind, she pulled into the post office parking lot to drop off her paperwork. As she climbed out of her truck, she froze in shock. Someone had vandalized her vehicle. Spray painted across the driver's side door in bold red letters were the words, "Thief." Her stomach churned as she stared at the graffiti, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and fear. Who would do such a thing? The answer was obvious. It had to be Karen. But without concrete evidence, there was little Sarah could do. She called the police to file a report, explaining the situation and mentioning Karen's ongoing harassment. The officers listened sympathetically, but warned her that proving Karen's involvement would be difficult unless they caught her in the act. That night, Sarah lay awake in bed, replaying the events of the past weeks in her mind. How had things spiraled so out of control? All she'd ever wanted was to do her job and serve her community. Now, thanks to Karen's relentless vendetta, she felt like a target, constantly looking over her shoulder and questioning whether she was safe. The stress was taking a toll not only on her mental health but also on her relationships. Friends and family urged her to quit her job or request a transfer, but Sarah refused. Walking away would mean letting Karen win, and that was something she couldn't accept. Despite her resolve, Sarah knew she couldn't handle this alone forever. She reached out to her supervisor at the post office, explaining the situation in detail. To her relief, he promised to support her fully, offering to speak with higher-ups about reassigning her route temporarily if needed. He also suggested involving legal counsel if Karen's behavior continued to escalate. Meanwhile, Karen remained undeterred. Emboldened by what she saw as progress, neighbors doubting Sarah, the vandalism on her truck, she doubled down on her efforts. She created a private Facebook group for the neighborhood, dubbing it Community Watch for Safe Deliveries. Within days, dozens of residents joined, sharing stories of misplaced packages and speculating about possible culprits. Though Sarah's name was never mentioned outright, the subtext was impossible to miss. One evening, as Karen scrolled through the group's comments, a notification popped up on her phone. It was a message from another member. "I saw her today. She was acting weird near my mailbox. Maybe we should confront her together." Karen smiled to herself, feeling a surge of vindication. Finally, people were starting to see things her way. Unbeknownst to Karen, however, her actions were beginning to attract unwanted attention. Several neighbors had grown uneasy about her aggressive tactics and reported her behavior to local authorities. Others reached out to Sarah privately, apologizing for doubting her and assuring her of their support. Slowly but surely, cracks were forming in Karen's carefully constructed narrative. Still, the damage had been done. Sarah's life had been turned upside down, and she knew it would take time to rebuild the trust she'd lost. For now, she focused on staying strong, leaning on her loved ones and reminding herself why she chose this career in the first place. Delivering mail wasn't just a job. It was a way to connect with people, to bring joy and reliability to their everyday lives. And Sarah wasn't about to let anyone take that away from her. Little did she know Karen's obsession was about to reach its boiling point, and when it did, the consequences would affect everyone involved. The tension between Sarah and Karen had been simmering for weeks, but it finally reached its breaking point on a chilly autumn afternoon. The air was crisp, the leaves crunching underfoot as Sarah made her way to a cluster of mailboxes tucked along a quiet rural road. This particular stop was far removed from Karen's neighborhood, yet somehow Sarah wasn't surprised when she spotted Karen's car parked haphazardly at the edge of the dirt path leading to the boxes. It seemed no matter where Sarah went, Karen found a way to follow. As Sarah stepped out of her truck gripping a small stack of envelopes and packages, she felt an immediate sense of unease. Karen sat behind the wheel of her car, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone screen. For a moment, Sarah considered ignoring her altogether, just doing her job and leaving. But something told her that wouldn't be enough this time. Sure enough, before Sarah could even begin sorting the mail, Karen emerged from her vehicle, marching toward her with a determined stride. "Sarah!" Karen called out, her voice sharp and commanding. "We need to settle this once and for all." Sarah turned slowly, steeling herself for whatever was coming next. "Karen," she said evenly, keeping her tone neutral despite the knot forming in her stomach. "What are you doing here? This isn't your route." Karen ignored the question entirely, stepping closer until she was practically nose to nose with Sarah. In one hand, she clutched her phone while the other rested firmly on her hip. "Don't play dumb with me," Karen snapped. "I know you've been avoiding me. You think running off to these remote areas will make me forget about my package? Well, guess what? It won't." Sarah took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm. "Karen, I've already explained this multiple times. Your package was delivered according to our records. There's nothing more I can do." But Karen wasn't listening. Instead, she thrust her phone into Sarah's face, jabbing at the screen with her finger. "Look at this," she demanded. On the display was a grainy video clip, shaky and poorly framed, showing Sarah placing a package into a mailbox. The footage was clearly taken from a distance, likely using binoculars or a zoom lens. "This is proof!" Karen exclaimed triumphantly. "You're tampering with people's property. Admit it!" Sarah blinked, momentarily stunned by the absurdity of the accusation. "Karen, that's just me delivering mail," she said, shaking her head. "That's literally my job." Karen scoffed loudly, throwing her hands up in frustration. "Oh, please, stop lying. I've seen how you slink around sneaking packages into random boxes like some kind of thief. And don't think I haven't noticed how nervous you get whenever I'm around. You're hiding something, Sarah, and I'm going to expose you." By now, their raised voices had drawn attention. A few cars slowed down as they passed, drivers craning their necks to see what the commotion was about. One woman walking her dog paused nearby, pretending to let the animal sniff a tree while eavesdropping on the argument. Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She hated being the center of attention, especially under circumstances like these. "Karen, you're making a scene over nothing," Sarah said firmly, taking a step back to create some distance between them. "If you have concerns, take them up with the post office. But harassing me like this isn't going to solve anything." Karen's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Harassing you?" she repeated incredulously. "Oh, that's rich. You're the one stealing packages and lying through your teeth. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to protect my community." Before Sarah could respond, Karen lunged forward, grabbing her arm roughly. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't call the police right now and have you arrested for theft," she hissed, her grip tightening painfully. Instinctively, Sarah pulled away, stumbling backward. "Get off me," she shouted, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "You're the one causing problems here, not me." The altercation caught the attention of a passing motorist, who quickly pulled over and dialed 911. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens echoed through the otherwise peaceful countryside. Both Sarah and Karen froze, turning toward the sound, as two police cruisers sped down the narrow road, kicking up clouds of dust in their wake. When the officers arrived, they wasted no time assessing the situation. One approached Sarah asking if she was okay, while the other spoke with Karen, who immediately launched into a tirade about Sarah's supposed crimes. "She's a thief," Karen declared, pointing accusing, end of text. As the police officers stepped out of their cruisers, the scene quickly transformed from a heated argument into something far more serious. The two officers approached Sarah and Karen with caution, their expressions calm but authoritative. One officer spoke directly to Sarah first, his tone gentle yet firm. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, glancing at her flushed face and slightly trembling hands. Sarah nodded, trying to steady her breathing. "Yes, I'm fine," she replied, though her voice betrayed the lingering tension. "But this woman," she gestured toward Karen, "has been following me for weeks, accusing me of things I haven't done. She's making false claims about me stealing packages and harassing me constantly." The second officer turned to Karen, who was still clutching her phone tightly in one hand. Her face was red, partly from anger and partly from embarrassment, as curious onlookers began gathering nearby. "Ma'am, can you explain what's going on here?" the officer asked, his tone neutral but probing. Without missing a beat, Karen launched into an impassioned monologue. "This postal worker has been tampering with my mail," she exclaimed, pointing dramatically at Sarah. "I've got proof right here, videos, photos, everything. She's been sneaking around my neighborhood, avoiding me and refusing to admit she stole my package. It's unacceptable." The officer raised a hand to interrupt her. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but let's take this step by step," he said calmly. "Do you have any concrete evidence that this person has stolen your package?" Karen hesitated for a split second before thrusting her phone toward the officer. "Right here," she declared confidently. "Look at these videos and pictures. They clearly show her acting suspiciously near mailboxes." The officer took the phone and scrolled through the content briefly. What he saw were grainy images and shaky videos of Sarah doing nothing more than delivering mail, placing envelopes in slots, sliding packages into boxes, and occasionally chatting with residents. There was no smoking gun, no definitive proof of wrongdoing. He handed the phone back to Karen with a polite nod. "Ma'am, this doesn't appear to show anything illegal or unethical," he explained gently. "It looks like someone simply doing their job." Karen's jaw dropped in disbelief. But it's obvious," she stammered. "She's hiding something, you have to believe me." Meanwhile, the other officer had finished speaking with Sarah and reviewing her side of the story. Satisfied that she hadn't violated any laws or postal procedures, he turned to Karen. "Ma'am, based on what we've seen and heard so far, there's no evidence to support your claims," he said firmly. "If you continue to harass this individual, you could be charged with stalking or harassment yourself." Karen's eyes widened in shock. "What? No! I'm the victim here. She's the one who should be arrested." Her voice rose again, drawing even more attention from passers-by. The officers exchanged a glance, silently agreeing that the situation needed to be de-escalated quickly. One of them stepped closer to Karen, his demeanor shifting from patient to stern. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and step away," he instructed. "If you refuse to comply, we'll have no choice but to place you under arrest for obstructing an investigation." For a moment, Karen seemed ready to argue further, her fists clenched at her sides. But then, perhaps sensing she was fighting a losing battle, she reluctantly backed away, muttering under her breath about injustice and corruption. The officers gave her one final warning before turning their attention back to Sarah. "Are you sure you're okay to continue your route?" the first officer asked Sarah kindly. "We can escort you if you'd like." Sarah managed a small smile, grateful for their support. "Thank you, but I'll be fine," she said. "I just want to finish my deliveries and go home." With that, the officers returned to their cruisers, leaving Karen standing alone by her car. As they drove off, Karen shot one last glare at Sarah before climbing into her vehicle and speeding away in a cloud of dust. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a glimmer of relief. The confrontation may not have resolved all her problems, but at least Karen's behavior had finally been addressed. News spreads through the neighborhood. Word of Karen's arrest and subsequent release after being issued a formal warning spread quickly through the community. Some neighbors expressed sympathy for Sarah, apologizing for doubting her and offering words of encouragement. Others whispered behind closed doors, speculating about whether Karen had gone too far. Regardless of individual opinions, one thing was clear: Karen's reputation had taken a significant hit. At the next HOA meeting, tempers flared as residents debated how to handle the fallout. A few outspoken members suggested stripping Karen of her unofficial enforcer title, while others defended her actions as misguided but well-intentioned. Ultimately, the board decided to issue a statement urging civility and cooperation among neighbors, a thinly veiled jab at Karen's behavior. Karen herself became noticeably quieter in the days following the incident. She stopped distributing flyers and deleted her controversial Facebook group, realizing that her campaign against Sarah had backfired spectacularly. Though she continued to attend HOA meetings, her once dominant presence was now subdued, almost meek. Life returns to normal, sort of. For Sarah, life slowly began returning to normal, or at least as close to normal as possible after such a tumultuous ordeal. Many residents went out of their way to express their gratitude for her dedication, leaving small gifts like homemade cookies or thank you notes tucked inside their mailboxes. These gestures meant the world to Sarah, reminding her why she loved her job despite its challenges. Still, the experience left lasting scars. Sarah found herself double-checking her surroundings more often, especially when delivering mail in secluded areas. She also made a point to document her interactions with difficult customers, ensuring she had records to protect herself in case another situation like Karen's arose. Her supervisors at the post office remained supportive, praising her professionalism throughout the ordeal. They even offered her additional training on conflict resolution and safety protocols, which she eagerly accepted. Knowing she had backup gave Sarah peace of mind, allowing her to focus on rebuilding trust within the community. Karen's final chapter. As for Karen, her obsession with Sarah gradually faded into the background, replaced by new grievances and complaints. Rumors circulated that she planned to move to a different neighborhood, citing personal reasons. Before leaving, she reportedly handed over her prized HOA rulebook to another resident, declaring, "You deal with them now." Though some neighbors breathed a sigh of relief at her departure, others couldn't help but feel sorry for her. After all, Karen's actions stemmed from a desire to maintain order, not entirely unreasonable, just poorly executed. Whether she learned anything from the experience remained unclear, but one thing was certain: Karen would always be remembered as the woman who took her quest for perfection too far. A new beginning. Months later, as autumn gave way to winter, Sarah reflected on everything she'd endured. The missing package saga had tested her patience, resilience, and faith in humanity, but it had also shown her the power of kindness and solidarity. Despite the chaos Karen brought into her life, Sarah emerged stronger and more determined than ever to serve her community with integrity. And so, as snowflakes began falling softly on her delivery route, Sarah smiled to herself, knowing that brighter days lay ahead.